In today's lesson, we're going to paint a picturesque lighthouse in winter, which is surrounded by beauty. The beach, the rolling waves, the bird life. It makes me feel at peace. Let's get our paints out and get started. Take your spray bottle, spray your pans of paint here, put some water in your palette, and let's start with our liner brush. Let's start with loading our brush with cadmium red. Now in this lighthouse, there's a dome on the top. So let's put our dome about right here on the watercolor paper. So you just want to make a dome shape. And then fill it. Spread that paint. It's the shape of a half dome. Now we're gonna, and then also there's a little pole sticking up on that dome. Like that. Okay. Clean your brush. You can always check it on your paper towel if it's clean. And let's use some of our burnt sienna. And now we're going to make the shape of the lighthouse. Make a line down here. And then bring it across. This is a little bit light. I want to make it a little darker. Just a tad. And then make a band here, like that, and then bring it down. And then make another line, and here there's going to be a walkway. So put a line here, and lines down, and we're going to make a grid and another line right through that, like a tic-tac-toe. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now let's change the color a little bit, and we want to take some of our white on our palette, put some on our palette here. And then add a touch of blue, just a little touch. We want it to be a light blue. Now let's come here and bring it down. Here's the long, tall part. This is a tall lighthouse, like that. Now if it's too light and you don't see it, you might need to darken it just a tiny bit. Now that's a little bit way too dark, but that's easy to fix. I'm just going to clean my brush a little bit and take some more of the white. Now it still might be a little dark, but that's okay. I'm going to take some of my water and spread the paint, and if it's still too dark on the paper, you can give it a little dab. And then put some more water on your brush, and that will dilute it a little bit there. And then keep spreading it to the other side. splattered there a little bit. That's an easy cleanup. Okay, now down below this lighthouse, there's a building. So I'm going to take some of the blue here and make part of that structure. Like about there. Now you don't want it too tall or too big. We want the lighthouse to look bigger. So just a little building off the lighthouse. Not too big, about like this. Now this building has a window. So I'm going to make the shape of a window, and there's a door. And that's the way to get into the lighthouse. And then spread the paint. Now the color is a little blue, but I'm going to change that and later. Again, with watercolor, you can slowly add layers and change it. So I'm going to do that. That's looking pretty good. Now the roof is going to be a brown. So let's use some of our burnt sienna. And make the roof here. It's not a tall roof, just a little roof there. And then spread the paint. Fill in that shape. Now the door, we're going to make the color of burnt sienna. So let's fill in the door. Now I'm going to change that color by adding another darker layer by using our other brown. And a big part of watercolor is to know when to let it dry and when not to. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So we got our basic shape of the tall lighthouse, the building next to it. Now let's create some color around the lighthouse. Now when I look at snow, you will see pure white and different shades of blue and purple because there's so much color around our world, and it will reflect that onto the snow. So I'm going to use, I have some of the blue, which I use the white and the intense blue, and I'm going to add a little more white on that. I want it a little lighter. It's a little bit too dark. Put some more white on that. And then dip my brush in my water to even make it lighter in color. And put some of that blue color along the lighthouse here. And some of the color ran by the door, but that's okay. It gives it character. Sometimes when the paint runs, I call it a happy accident. It's kind of fun and interesting what happens on the paper. So we want to continue to spread some of that color down here. Now when you get here past the lighthouse, we want it to go down like there's the hill and the ocean is off to the side here. Like that. And again, spread some of the water of the color here. Like that. Now if you think it runs too much, you can just give it a little dab there. Now we'll give it a little texture. Now in this snow, I want to add a little more reflection. So let's add some of our Ultramarine Blue. I'm going to put some over here. So here I'm mixing a little bit of the white, the intense blue, and some of the Ultramarine Blue. That gives a little complexity to the color. and adding to the snow there. Again, if it's too dark, just add some water there. If it's too strong, and spread it a little bit. Because there's some shadows that tall lighthouse tower is reflecting onto the snow. So I want to give a little bit like that. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now, I want to add some little color of sky. Just some little floating clouds. Just some puffy. I don't want it to be really dark. So I have my mixture here. And I'm going to add a little more white. And what's fun when you put your paint on the palette here, if you have some paint on your palette, go ahead and mix it all up. See what happens. You can always test it on your paper towel to see if you like it. If you don't, use it. If you like it, use it. If you don't. Then you can change it. So we're just going to put some just very faint floating clouds that are above, close to the lighthouse, just passing through. Maybe one more down here. We don't need much, just faintly. Like that. They're just floating and having a good day. Floating out to the ocean. Like that. Okay. Now let's give it a good dry before we continue. Okay. Now let's switch for a moment and use our round and pointed tip brush. Now, on this tall lighthouse, there's some shadows, and I want to make the light coming in this direction. So there's some dark shadows on the side here. And for that, I'm going to use some of the Ultramarine Blue. And some of the burnt sienna. I want it to be kind of a blue grayish color. That's looking pretty good. And put some on the line here. Need a little more water. That's a bit too light. A little more water. Now I see it's kind of a little bit too blue. Need to add some more of the burnt sienna. Yeah, that's more kind of a grayish blue. Put it up here and bring it down on this side of the lighthouse. Further down, all the way across this band here. And then continue down this way, all the way to the end there. And then make some horizontal shadow. Here. Spread that paint. Imagine yourself being at that ocean, smelling the fresh air, the waters, hearing the seagulls. That's looking pretty good. Okay. So let's come back and fill this window in, and we want it to be a bluish color. So let's use some of our Ultramarine Blue and a little bit with our burnt sienna. And fill in that spot. Like that. Now, as I look at this, I see this cloud looks like it's part of the building. I want to change that. So since I have this color on my brush, I'm going to make a little bit more darkness on this cloud, just a little bit. Now again, if it gets too dark and you don't like it, just take your brush, dab some water, and dilute it a little bit. Just like that. And again, if it's too much, we'll dab it a little bit. I don't want it too much, just a little bit. And then you can add some water and make it fade. Fade it a little bit. But I want a little more definition so that you can see the contrast of the white. And that's because of the light shining onto it. And the light is coming in this direction. Pick up your liner brush and fill it with load your brush with the burnt umber and put some of the burnt sienna. We wanted a darker brown, and using the two browns will give it some richness. So there's a window here and a window here. Now some of this brown, let's use this same color of the two browns with a touch of the ultramarine blue. And there's some of that reflecting a little bit by that window up here and further down. Now that's a little bit strong here, and I'm gonna use my brush and dilute it some so it's not strong. You know, a lighthouse gets weathered and sometimes it develops some rust stain color from the water and the salt water hitting it. And it will create some interesting color on the lighthouse. So we're going to add some of that brown down this way. Like that. Need a little more. Again, if it's strong, add that water. And carry it on to some to the other side. Just like that. That's looking pretty good. All right. Now this middle part is white, and let's use some of that brown. Like that. Now I'm cleaning my brush. I'm dipping my brush in ultramarine blue and just mixing it with the wet color. Like that. Okay, I'm going to let that sit and dry. Now this part is where the light is, where the beacon is, so that the ships can see the lighthouse and the light shines. So let's use our cadmium yellow and load your liner brush with that and make some light here and just make a circle like that. And some of that light is casting off to the side here. Okay, let's stop and give that part a good dry. All right. So let's load our liner brush with the color we have here on our palette, which is the burnt sienna, the burnt umber. And there's some dark areas there. On this part of the dome, there's a brown dark lip on there. Now I want it to be almost a little darker and almost to a gray like steel. So let's add a touch of the Ultramarine Blue. And that will give it that grayish blue. And then use that down below here. There's another dark shape there. And down below here, the railing is dark, making that grid. And that will make that pop out more, like that. And then let's use here this line. I'm not covering up all of the orange. I'm going to leave a little bit there. And then there's, this dome has a twirl on it. So let's make some lines on it. Like that. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now let's make the line down here a little darker. Little thicker and darker like that. Then it's always good to stop and pause to look. Now let's add some of that darkness in the windows here and a little bit on the roof. Some on the window here. Some on the roof. Leaving some of the other color there to give it some contrast. And then use some of that on the door. Actually outline it. Like that. And then let's use a little bit around the window here. Now, this is a little bit wet and it's running a little bit. That's okay. Now, this to me is a little bit, I need to water it down. The shape is a little bit too strong. I want it to be a little more faded. And is easy to fix by just adding some water. I want it to be a little more faded, not so blunt. Like it's a worn roof that's seen a lot of water. All right. Now, this house here looks a little flat and it needs some shadows. So again, I'm using the burnt sienna, burnt umber, and a little bit of the ultramarine blue. Dip it in water. Now that's a little strong, but again, you can dab it and add some water and spread that paint. There's some little shadows in that building. I like that. That's looking pretty good. Just a touch. You don't need much. All right. Now, this is winter, so there's some trees without leaves. And I love painting trees without leaves. So let's start by just using some of our burnt sienna. as a lighter layer that we're going to add. And there's some right here, and bring it up. And it has quite a few branches there. So let's bring some more branches here. I love winter and those stark trees against the white snow and the winter colors. Now a little below the tree, the trunk is a little thicker. That's looking pretty good. Now we need some more trees here. So let's do that. You could add one or two. I think mine just needs one. I'm going to put one about right here. And it's pretty tall. And bring it down. And again, I'm making the trunk a little bit thicker. Has these tall branches reaching out, growing. But no leaves. I just love that starkness that it creates. Now, in this, there's some grass, but the grass is the brown color. Again, we're going to use our burnt sienna. And put a few of these. And again, it's good to kind of, after I do this, I want to sit back and think if I need to add any more trees. Yeah, I think I need a third one. Not as big as the tree here, just a little smaller. Needs a buddy. Needs a buddy there. That one tree's lonely. Needs a buddy tree. So we're going to make a buddy tree. It's not as big. It's not as strong as that one. But it probably will be someday. But it's its buddy tree. It's just starting on its journey. About like that. That's looking pretty good. All right. Now that we have that lighter layer, let's add the darker. And to do that, mix the two browns, the burnt sienna and the burnt umber. And I'm going to start where it's not so wet. About right here. And you can leave some of the lighter coat of color visible. And that will create some depth. That's going pretty good there. And then load your brush as needed. Again, the two browns. Go on this other tree. Create those branches. That's looking pretty good. Again, I think this needs some of the Ultramarine Blue. So there's sometimes a little grayish blue on those trees. And it will darken it almost to a black. You know, experiment and play. Have fun with this. And remember, this is only a piece of paper. You're not going to ruin anything. Enjoy the process. Try and relax your grip. And if you need to take a break from it and you're frustrated, go ahead and do that. There's times that I've done that where I said, you know, I just need to stop and go outside and smell the fresh air or something, and then come back to it. And then we need some of those dark little places, strands sticking out where we put some of that grass there. Just a little bit. That's looking pretty good. Some more here. All right. Let's stop and give it a good dry. Okay. So I see we need to add a little bit more in the background. Just like some faded blue mountains that you might see. So let's take some of our white, put some on your palette if you don't already have some. I want to put a little more. And use some of the intense blue. Now I want to almost make this a little more on the purple side, so I'm going to add a touch of crimson. That's a very strong color. You don't need much, just a touch to give it more of a purple bluish tint. And there's some, just a little bit here. And again, if it's strong, you can just kind of use water and fade it. Fade it a little bit. Put some among the tree, a little bit here, just to faint like there's some mountains off to the side, off in the distance that you're looking at. Just a little bit like that. And I see that there could you use some darker deepened shadows with the blue. So I have some paint on my palette here. So I'm going to use that, but add a little more intense blue and some of the crimson. I wanted a little bit of a deeper purple. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to add some here. And a little bit here. And you can see that there's 3 shades. You have the pure white, the lighter blue, and then a darker one. Even a little more, I think crimson would be good. Yeah, that even gives it a little more. Have fun with the color. Play with the color. Just think of all the wonderful colors you see in nature. I think that's looking pretty good. So again, pause, look at it, see what you think you do need or don't need, and have fun with it. Now I think here I want to work on the dome just a little bit, and it doesn't need much. It looks a little flat, so I want to cast a little shadow. Now this is dry, and I'm going to load my liner with cadmium red and just put a little stronger of that color little sporadically in the dome. Just like that, so that it looks like there's shadows and a little more depth. And then the last thing I want to do is just make a little darker line here, and then I think I should stop. And, you know, have fun with this. I really like painting lighthouses. I think it's one of my favorite subjects to paint. Except there's one thing missing as I'm looking at it. Now this is winter. And so I'm just straightening the lines here a little, just so they stand out more. And I've seen these on lighthouses, is a Christmas wreath. And we're going to hang a cheerful Christmas wreath about right there. And it's really easy to make one. And to use, we're going to use sap green, so load your brush with sap green. And just make a circle here. It's just going to be a small little wreath. It's getting in the season of Christmas. So just load your brush with sap. Just make a circle. Now we're going to stop and give it a good dry. I'm going to add some nice berries on it, but on this instance, we don't want wet on wet because we don't want it to run. Okay, now check if your brush is clean and dry it. Now we want more paint on this than water. And load your brush with crimson, and we just want to get the tip of our brush and just put some dots, some tiny little dots for red berries, just like that. And then stop. I like my little lighthouse. It makes me peaceful when I look at it. So I hope you enjoyed today's lesson. Enjoy your day.